Welcome to Kindred, hosted by me, Kate, and my sister, Jen. In this podcast, we explore our human relationship to the natural world. In connecting to this planet, we also connect to understanding, compassion, and empathy. How can we see ourselves not as separate or above animals in nature, but a critical and integrated part of an active ecosystem? Through conversations with animal advocates, scientists, conservationists, and many others, we look to inspire a new awareness of how and why we connect to animals and nature in order to repair and restore our relationship to the natural world. Hello and welcome to Kindred. How is everyone today? Jennifer, how are you? Nice to see you again.
I'm good. Nice to see you too. The weather is very confusing this morning. I can't decide if it's going to be cloudy or rainy, but
sure is breezy. It's a breezy old day on the outskirts of Philadelphia, the old country.
At least it's not raining anymore after 3 days of torrential down.
2 inches of rain we got yesterday, so that's a lot.
Yeah, that was just yesterday, right?
Yeah, it was just yesterday. I know, so crazy. So I have a big question for you today, Jennifer. You ready?
I'm ready.
Do you consider yourself a dog person or a cat person?
Oh, if I had to just choose one, I would probably say dog, just because I've had dogs in my life longer, but I would say I'm both.
Yes. If I had to choose one, I'd say both myself. I wouldn't choose one.
Yeah.
And you've had what, 1, 2, 3? How many cats have you had?
4.
Yeah. I've only had 2. But I do love them very much. And a couple of the cats you had was thanks to me. You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. You've actually had 4 cats because you've had 2 and now you have 2 more.
I have 2 more. Yes, it's a whole new era. But I think it's funny because I think most people think of me as a dog person because there are more dog people out there than cat people. And I think for me, it has to do with, like you said, like I've had more dogs than cats because our cats, Rue and Marcus, lived for 18 years.
Yeah, so, right.
But I consider myself a cat person as well. And like I said, like you said, now we have Izzy and Dennis. And then, Kat, a producer. She has 2 cats. Dan, our editor, he has a cat. You've had your cats, Abby, Kiko, RAP, plus 2 others, like we were just saying, that were basically just wild animals that you gave a home to. So that was very nice. So we're a cat-loving podcast over here. And it's interesting. When I worked in rescue with the SPCA, some of the worst abuse cases I saw involved cats. And they're just, to me, such an underdog. And I think that's why throughout this podcast, you'll definitely find we cover all kinds of cats. We have the episode with the Trap King. We have the episode A Deeper Bond with Dr. Monique Udell. And we have Man's Other Best Friend with Dr. Kristen Vitale. And today we're covering a new kind of cat, one that is directly related to our house cat babies.
That's right.
Yeah. So today we are going to learn about wildcats in places like Southern Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America. But I'm not talking about lions or cheetahs or tigers. We're talking about 33 different species of small wild cats, like little wild cats that weigh a couple pounds. Crazy. So, when I first looked into them, I was like, wait, what? There are cats that live in Africa that look just like Marcus? I just was so blown away. I'm like, what is this?
Who knew? And the answer is not me. Yeah, I did not.
Who knew? How did I not know? Yet again. But some of these cats, like, you would 100% mistake them for the domestic cat down the street. And this is why we want to learn about these cats, because they are why we have our house cats today. Thank you.
Right. They're the equivalent of the wolf to the dog, right?
Exactly. Except they even look more alike.
Yeah, they sure do.
So we've asked conservation biologist Dr. Wai-Ming Wong of Panthera to join us today to introduce us to a few of these superlative felines. Dr. Wong joined Panthera in 2013 as the Tiger Program Manager and now serves as the director of the Small Cats Program. And just a bit about Panthera from their website, panthera.org. Founded in 2006, Panthera is devoted to conservation of the world's 40 species of wild cats and the vast ecosystems they inhabit. Their team of biologists, data scientists, law enforcement experts, and wildcat advocates studies and protects the 7 species of big cats. So that's cheetahs, jaguars, leopards, lions, pumas, snow leopards, and tigers. Panthera also created targeted conservation strategies for the world's most threatened and overlooked small cats. And if you want to head over to our website, kindredpodcast.co, you can find links to this episode in our show notes in regards to these cats. And we'll be posting more images of them on Instagram, the Kindred Pod. So check those out and follow us there. Also, a little reminder, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please rate and review us. But I just am thinking, like, while you're listening, maybe just jump on panthera.org so that you can see what we're talking about and really get why I'm like, that's a house cat. That's a pound and a half. That's this crazy, efficient, amazing little elusive killer. So super pumped about this conversation. Dr. Wong was so much fun to talk to and just clearly loves these small cats. That was a real joy to find out about them. So let's head over to our conversation with Dr. Wong and these amazing little cats, and we'll see you at the takeaway. Ming, welcome to Kindred, and thank you so much for joining us today. Could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be a part of this podcast series. I'm really excited to talk about small cats with you all. Yeah. So just a brief background to myself. I'm a conservation biologist, which is something that I've always aspired to be ever since a young child. And over the past decade, I've been involved with large mammal, large carnivore conservation, particularly across Southeast Asia. My PhD was investigating how large mammals respond to agricultural development in Sumatra, Indonesia, with a particular focus on sun bears. And all of this was in a national park in West Sumatra called the Kerinci Seplat National Park, which is one of the largest national parks in Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow.
And so having completed my PhD, I now work for an organization called Panthera. It's an NGO dedicated to the conservation of the world's 40 wildcat species. Historically, Panthera just focused on the conservation of the world's big cats. As we all know them, lions, tigers, leopards, snow leopards, jags, as well as pumas and cheetahs. But it wasn't until 2019 where Panthera officially launched the Small Cat Program, which I currently direct and lead the development of the conservation strategies for the 33 species of small cats. So I've got quite a lot of work ahead of me to kind of really put the conservation spotlight on the 33 small cat species, which is why I'm really glad to speak with you all to kind of shed some light on some of the urgent conservation priorities that these group of species urgently need.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that makes me feel a little better that it's only been since 2015 that Panthera launched this. So, sort of like us, and because I and many of us know so little about small wild cats, let alone, like you said, the in and around 33 species of them. I'd love to have you familiarize us with a few of these incredible creatures. Like a lot of other animals, I had no idea they existed until I was researching something else altogether and came across this tiny little cat that had the highest kill rate of any animal on the planet, weighing in at like 2.4 to 5.4 pounds. So they look so much like a domestic cat, the one that I found living in our own homes, it just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I texted Kat, our producer, and it was just like, we must do an episode on these amazing animals. So here we are. So let's get to know these cats. So of the 33 species, we're only going to highlight a few of them, because we'll have to come back around next season and get some more details about some other ones. But I wanted to start with a black-footed cat because that's who I found first of all. Tell us about this highly efficient, elusive, tiny cat and what they look like.
Yeah, I mean, so the black-footed cat is a very cool, very cute species of a small cat that's native to Southern Africa, primarily the arid regions of South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. Just like you said, it's one of the smallest cats in the world, weighing between 3 to 5.5 pounds. And they're probably best well known for being the deadliest cat species with a hunting success rate of around 60%. So to kind of put this into context, lions and tigers, they probably have a hunting success rate of around 10 to 20%, depending on prey availability. So this small cat is certainly very deadly. There are small cats, so their short stature allows them to kind of creep up on prey in short grass, kind of giving them the competitive edge over the larger species such as the African wildcat, Cape fox, and caracals. The real kind of ninjas of the grassland in this case. A close colleague of Panthera, a guy called Dr. Alexander Sliwa, who leads the black-footed cat working group, has been studying black-footed cats now and observing these species in the Kimberley region in South Africa for over 20 years. And he and his team have seen black-footed cats catch up to, I think it was around 14 different prey items in a single night, just to kind of illustrating how effective they are at hunting. And I've seen videos of black-footed cats. The mothers keep on bringing back mice to the den, and the kittens are, they have full bellies, they're ready to play, and you can see the mother getting frustrated because she's putting all this effort into, catching all these mice and other rodents and other prey items, but she's just doing too good of a job looking after her kittens.
Now, why does she keep hunting if they're not hungry?
Because sometimes food can be, a scarce resource, and so that's not something that you would want to. If there's an opportunity to catch prey, and any carnivore would take that opportunity, particularly for a small cat where their metabolism is a lot quicker.
That makes sense.
They need to have that constant,
more frequent food. Yeah, I got you.
Exactly. Okay. Whereas a lion or a tiger, they could feed on the carcass for a number of weeks and kind of cache that and save that for later. Small cats kind of need that daily caloric intake with all those rodents.
They are really cute though. They've got to be easy to feature because people probably love them, right? I mean, well, I guess if they know about them, like like my sister was saying, I didn't even know these existed. So yeah, it's just so interesting.
Yeah. And so just a side note about the cuteness, and that's one of the things about small cats is that often they are, because people relate them to our house cats. House cats are one of the most popular kind of pets around. And so when they see these wild cats, they often think, oh, they're very cute, and which they are. But, a colleague of mine, Dr. Gregory Breton, he researches sandcats in Morocco, and he was able to capture a very nice video of sandcats and a family of sandcats, which went viral on National Geographic and all sorts. And one of the things that came out of that was, sandcats, they're incredibly cute. Where do we get them?
Yeah.
How do we get our hands on them? And it's like, well, that's not the message that we're trying to put across.
I got you.
And so one of the things is, yes, they're cute, and there is a bit of demand of these wild small cats in the illegal pet trade.
That's right.
And we're starting to see some of the fashionable stuff, with the Savannah cat and the Bengal cat, which are kind of hybrids of servals and leopard cats, and people increasing them as having them as pets.
Yep.
Oh, dear.
But in any case, I understand that was a bit of a sidebar to
that's a bummer. Yeah, that's a bummer.
Important point that I'm really glad you brought up, because again, we need to say, yes, these cats are cute, but if you take like the black-footed cat, you do not want living in your house, because maybe she'll kill you and drag you back to her babies because she's
because she's such a deadly hunter.
Animals
Yeah.
I mean, exactly that. That's exactly it. They're wild animals. They're not domesticated, and they have their own kind of requirements. And particularly for some of these small cats, they may be small, but some of them do have large home ranges.
Yeah.
And so there are these kind of ecological aspects that you have to kind of take into account.
And you were saying that the black-footed cat is highly aware of, they're very in tune to their environment. So you were talking about how putting up cameras in their landscape, they know immediately that they're there. So they're really hard to photograph.
Oh,
Yeah,
so they avoid the cameras.
They're very difficult to study in the wild. So again, my colleague, Dr. Sliwa, he's been studying them for about 20 to 25 years in South Africa, in this one particular region. And he and his team have been catching black-footed cats and fitting them with GPS collars. So in this particular study area, we know a lot about them in terms of their reproductive rates, their lifespan, causes of mortality and all that sort of stuff. But elsewhere across their range, they're not very well studied. And that's because one of the reasons is that they're so difficult to study in the wild. They're a cat species that are incredibly in tune to their environment. And they, occur in dens. And so if you put camera traps out in their habitat, they'll know about it and they'll avoid it, which means you can't get the necessary detections on the cameras to be able to apply scientific analyses for us to be able to estimate their population numbers, kind of like their habitat use and their distribution. So yeah, they're incredibly difficult to study. And so one of the projects that we're doing in Panthera, in collaboration with a researcher in South Africa, with she'll be doing her PhD soon, a woman called Michelle Schroeder. She is trialing non-invasive methods using genetics to study black-footed cats. And this will give us the information about habitat use, distribution, and this will allow us to kind of fill in some pretty significant knowledge gaps for the species that will enable us to initiate effective conservation measures for the species.
That's great. That's great. So collars, scat, the usual, but getting those bloods, getting the genetic, that's really going to make all the difference.
Yeah, because that's going to probably be the most effective way to study them. And so, black-footed cats, they are, because of their size, their small size, their large home ranges, and their low fecundity and restricted range, it makes them very vulnerable to anthropogenic habitat changes and fragmentation, compared to the more generalist sympatric carnivores that they live in, that they coexist with. Their small size also makes them very vulnerable to predation. We've seen from Dr. Sliwa's data that about half of the collared black-footed cats are lost to predation annually, mostly due to caracals and black-backed jackals. They also eat black-footed cats. They also eat prey such as spring hare, ground squirrels, and aardvark. And these prey species are typically regarded by farmers as pest species, so they're also exterminated as well. So, black-footed cats are threatened with a number of threats, from habitat modification, prey depletion, interspecific interactions with other species. And so it's really critical for us to be able to kind of dig into their ecology, and just kind of get those baseline ecological information for us to be able to establish effective conservation initiatives and plans for the species.
Absolutely. So now let's move over to South America. Talk to us about the Ocilla cat. Where do they operate and what do they look like?
So yeah, the Ocilla is another very rare and elusive small cat species that we know very little about. But it's a small wild cat that's native to Central and South America. They have this kind of disjunct population in Costa Rica and Panama, and then they occur throughout the Amazon basin and central Brazil. And again, they're one of the smallest wild cats in Americas that weigh between 2 to 6 pounds.
Wow.
They're a spotted cat. and they bear a likely resemblance to ocelots and margays. And so they're often sympatric with those other species. So you tend to kind of find ocelots, margays, and oncillers in the same place.
Okay.
But they look very similar. And so to the untrained eye, it will be very difficult to kind of determine which is which. Ocelots are much larger. They have a bit of a stockier head.
Yeah.
Margays are probably medium-sized, and then oncillers are probably the smallest of the three.
Okay.
And I would say mostly from camera trap data, people get mistaken between margays and oncillers.
Okay.
Oncillers that aren't as arboreal as margays, and they aren't as terrestrial as ocelots.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of fall somewhere in between, where they spend some time on the ground and some time up in the trees as well.
Oh, interesting.
But again, they're extremely rare and elusive and very difficult to study in the wild. And so, again, one of the things is that we would like to implement camera traps to kind of estimate, those baseline ecological parameters that I was talking about, for us to kind of measure any conservation initiative against.
Absolutely. So now let's move to South and Southeast Asia, where you're going to talk about the flat-headed cat, which does not do this animal justice because they are gorgeous. And also one of the rarest and smallest. Is that correct? I mean, these all seem like the rarest and the smallest, but.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, we could pretty much say that every 33 small cat species are rare and elusive, and there's many knowledge gaps. But for flat-headed cats, certainly this is arguably one of the rarest felids in the world. Southeast Asia, which is where most of my background is, has been camera trapped, for decades now. And tigers are an endangered species, but we know how to study them. We know where to put cameras to get those detections. So we have thousands and thousands of camera trap images of tigers, and we have databases.
Right.
But for flat-headed cat, I think over the past maybe 2 decades, maybe have 15 camera trap records, 15, 20 camera trap records.
Wow.
Which again, it doesn't allow us to conduct any scientific statistical analyses to understand anything about their ecology.
Well,
so we do.
Like tree dwelling too. It's like you were saying with the oncilla, like as well. Like, I mean, are you going to climb trees and put cameras in them, and then they're not going to? I mean, it sounds really tricky.
It sounds really tricky. I mean, so going back to the oncilla example, yes, I mean, arboreal camera trapping is something that we would like to explore, but what tree do you choose? All this sort of stuff. How high do you go up? What kind of technology do you use? Because there's monkeys, there's birds, there's all sorts, and so. Yeah, I mean, just studying small cats in general has its challenges, but I mean, conservation technology is something that is definitely kind of catching up with acoustic sensors, more efficient cameras, and all this sort of stuff.
Yes, I bet it must be big. That makes sense.
Yeah,
is a lot of their elusiveness just a survival tool because they have so many predators that they just have to be like very, very vigilant of their surroundings? Is that why they're so hard to and so tuned to their environment?
Yeah, possibly one of the reasons. Exactly that. I mean, cats are sympatric with other carnivores and predators, and we've seen in the big cat world that big cats do displace other cats. In India, in the tiger reserves, tigers tend to push out leopards to the marginal areas.
Right.
Ocelots also do that as well. There's something called the ocelot effect, where in areas where you tend to find high densities of ocelots, you'll find very low densities of other cats, or other small species of cats. And so, yeah, there is this dynamic. And that's one of the things that we want to understand is kind of interspecies relationships. How do they interact with each other?
And just to say, just because they're small, like you were saying with the black-footed cat, they have a large territory range. Just because they're small doesn't mean they stay in a little mile range. So that's another thing, right? I mean,
that's another thing. Yeah. And they just move through the forest differently.
Yeah.
Big cats will use established animal trails and ridge trails. They like to use pathways with the least resistance.
Yeah.
But because they're big, they're kind of limited to those kind of trails, where
Right.
small cats can use much smaller trails that kind of go through the forest.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So is that why it is the best way to study them, getting them these collars, because then you can track them, or is that just really hard to do? Also,
It's really hard to do. I mean, because they occur at low densities, we don't know that much about their habitat use. Placement of traps becomes quite difficult, and of course they share the habitat with other cats, and so the traps that we put out, they don't specifically target oncillas or fat-headed
this one's only for oncillas.
Exactly.
Right.
There's a lot of bycatch, and so it takes a lot of time.
Yes, of course. And
I get that.
Putting like the cameras in the trees, like monkeys are going to play with those and like mess around. So it's just like.
I mean, monkeys play with the cameras on the ground as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess this ages me a little bit. But when I first started camera trapping, I wasn't using digital cameras. I was using a 35mm camera that had an active sensor. Whenever an animal walked past it, it would trigger. So I was using these Canon cameras with the film, and so I only had 35 frames.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so it'll be really annoying when I've trekked through the jungle, deployed this camera, and waited a couple of weeks and come back, and I look at the pictures and I just see macaques all over the place. I'm like, okay, well that's 2 weeks of data I've lost.
Man.
And they also have a knack of learning or figuring out how to turn off cameras. My organization Panthera, we manufacture our own camera traps for our wildlife surveys, and the on and off button is right underneath the camera, and so we have pictures of monkeys kind of looking around the camera, and then you can see their finger touching the button, and then the camera's not active, and it's like,
I mean, that must be kind of amusing but irritating at the same time when you're
indeed, it's amusing for a very, very short period of time. And then great guys, but we need the cat data.
So you have to be really creative. And is that a lot of your job, is trying to figure out how to capture data? Or, I mean, that seems like a really a big challenge to this.
It's a huge challenge, particularly for small cats, small carnivores. And so that's one of the research priorities that we have in Panthera's small cat program, is to understand or better understand the scientific tools that we have to study small cats in the wild. Camera trapping has become a very popular and very powerful tool in conservation. Pretty much every conservation project uses camera traps, and they certainly yield very important information, critical information that we can use to determine, very important ecological parameters. But for small cats, again, it's very difficult. Where do you place the cameras? How high do you place the cameras? Kate, you were talking before about, we know so little about small cats, but some of the stuff that we do know comes from other studies. It doesn't come from targeted studies. It comes from other studies that were perhaps maybe implemented for tigers or jaguars or whatever species. But the design is completely different. Cameras will be, a certain height off the ground. They'll be spaced, maybe 2 to 3 kilometers away from each other. And so within that, you're going to miss a lot of small cat data. You're going to miss a lot of these detections, which is necessary for the scientific analyses.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the questions, and so it's all about detections. It's all about just detecting them in space and time for us to be able to do the analyses. And so how do we increase that? So we use camera traps, but another tool that I think is very underutilized is genetics. And with that, there's an emerging technique called environmental DNA, where, animals, even us, we're shedding DNA into our environment as we speak. Right. And with specific filters and primers and other equipment, we're able to kind of collect that DNA in the field, whether it's soil samples or, whether we're testing the water in a pond or a lake. And we can extract that DNA. Obviously, we'll need the appropriate DNA primers for the species and all that sort of stuff. But that has proven to be a very effective method to increase detections for very rare species. Okay. And so that's something that we'd like to investigate for small cat conservation, is overlapping these scientific methods: camera trapping, genetics, collaring, for us to really get an in-depth ecological study for wild small cats. I always refer to that as kind of the holy trinity of camera trapping, collars, and genetics.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Now I was going to ask you this question later, but it's the appropriate time to ask it now. In collecting your data, how much do you rely on local native and indigenous communities?
A huge amount. Local communities, indigenous communities are critical for any conservation projects, as they're the ones, it's their backyard. They're the ones that are first affected by these kind of conservation measures. So it's really important to have them on side. But also, no one knows more about the forest than the local communities and the indigenous communities. And so we rely extremely heavily on their local knowledge for us to even navigate the forest and the jungles and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So it's really important to have them on side on your team to collect reliable data, but also just for the safety of the team as well. Like I said, they know the boundaries, they know the safety issues in these habitats, and so it's really critical to have them on board. Yeah. But it's not just about collecting data for wildcat conservation. Primarily one of the main threats that affects most cats is poaching, and so to mitigate that, we establish site security teams and anti-poaching patrol teams on the ground. And they, walk along the forest and conduct patrols. And so in many of these cases, we use local communities, indigenous tribes, to help us kind of protect the lands that they are dependent on. And so there are a number of examples here. In Malaysia, we work very closely with the orang asli to help us set cameras and also conduct anti-poaching patrols. So, that's in Borneo, Malaysia, and we can go all the way over to Washington in Washington State in the US, where we work very closely with the First Nation tribes there to understand, puma surveys, bobcat surveys, and understand their roles in the ecosystems that ultimately going to benefit the people as well.
So I wanted to shift gears a bit and talk about now, since you're already talking about the human-wildlife conflict in context to these small cats, like how have you and Panthera worked with these communities to work with these critical animals?
Yeah, human-wildlife conflicts is a significant issue for small wild cats. As I mentioned before, there is a degree of interspecies interactions where larger cats will tend to push out the smaller cats into the marginal areas. And it's these marginal areas that are often human dominated or have, agricultural landscapes. And this is where the human wildlife conflict ensues, in these kind of danger zones. And this is the case for big cats and small cats, but the scale is very different. For the conflicts for big cats, they may take large livestock, a water buffalo or some cattle, maybe even human lives, and or damage infrastructure, people's homes and things like that. And so this comes at a significant economic cost, and therefore, they tend to kind of retaliate. And so to mitigate that, often the mitigation measures that we put into place can be quite costly because you have to replace cattle. There's compensation initiatives and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
With small cats, it's the same. There can be livestock depredation and stuff like that, but it's on a much smaller scale. Within these agricultural landscapes and these human-dominated landscapes, many people will keep chickens and goats and ducks for subsistence purposes. And it'll be fairly often that small cats will come and depredate on these these small holding livestock. And local communities would often retaliate against that. But it just takes a very little bit of awareness raising and education to say, they're not causing any significant economic damage to your livelihoods.
Right.
And these types of conflicts are very easily mitigated. We can very easily provide predator-proof chicken coops or better wiring for your goat pens, and also just a little bit more education on animal husbandry, for example. Pen your animals at night. Just things like that.
Yeah.
But also alongside that, be able to raise awareness and educate local communities the importance of having small cats on your land. I mean, they are indicators of ecosystem health.
Yep.
So an example of this is, we support a project in Nepal with one of our partnered organizations called Small Mammal Research Conservation Foundation that operate across Nepal. And we support a fishing cat project there where they have mitigated human fishing cat conflicts in these fish pond areas that border the Koshi Tapu Wildlife Reserve in Nepal.
Okay, so I just have to be clear for everyone to hear. You did say fishing cat, correct?
Yes.
Fishing cat, yes.
That's
yes,
what
yeah.
I caught that too. Like, I didn't know that was a cat. That was a fishing cat.
Right. So let's just pause on that because you need to tell us what the fishing cat looks like now.
Okay, so the fishing cat. So far we've talked about small cats in the range of kind of 2 to 5 pounds, whereas the fishing cat is much larger than that. I think that would be kind of classed in the medium-sized cats, where they could weigh up between kind of 20 to 30 pounds.
Okay.
Similar size to kind of like a bobcat.
Yes. Okay, interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah,
and they only eat fish? They only fish? Is that all they eat?
No. So they eat aquatic organisms, so fish, crabs, but they're a cat, so they can eat anything. So from rodents as well. So generally, as their name would probably suggest, fishing cat, that they tend to prefer wetland areas. And so you find them in the kind of the wetland and the coastal areas across South and Southeast Asia, all the way from India, Nepal, Bangladesh, all the way into Thailand. And there are some kind of question marks over Vietnam and Java. There used to be fishing cats there many, many years ago, but we haven't detected any records of them.
Okay.
But fishing cats have a bad habit of looking like leopard cats sometimes. And so sometimes people will get a very blurry image of a leopard cat and think, oh, maybe that's a fishing cat. So who knows with continued camera trapping in those areas.
So what do their paws look like?
I was wondering if they were webbed too. I was curious.
They are webbed. Yes.
Are? Oh my God.
Yes, they're partially webbed. Unlike most cats, their claws don't retract either, so they're always out, which I guess helps them kind of quickly grab their prey when they're diving into rivers and streams and people's ponds.
I wish we had those in our country. Yeah, those.
I think the other cat that has that is the cheetah that doesn't retract its claws. But yeah, the fishing cats.
I just imagine them like by the beach, drinking pina coladas, doing the breaststroke every once in a while, just relaxing.
Depends where you find them.
That's right.
Maybe the ones in Thailand, having a great time on the beaches.
On the beach.
Who knows?
Sorry, distracting. Yeah.
Sorry, this is amazing. So yes, back to Nepal and the fishing cat and what you were talking about before.
Right. So obviously these fish ponds would attract the fishing cats from the neighboring kind of wildlife reserve, and they would eat a few fish from these fishing ponds, and the locals would often retaliate. And so this local organization was able to kind of work very closely with these local communities and be able to advocate for their presence on their farms and kind of raise awareness and educate locals about their importance in the ecosystem and as indicators of ecosystem health. They wouldn't be around if the rivers were unhealthy.
Right.
They wouldn't be around if the wetlands were degrading. And so they're around, which means the neighboring habitat is intact, it's functional. Okay. And that ultimately has benefits for the local communities, from climate to, livelihoods and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
The other thing is that people want to see fishing cats. And so when I visited the site, the local people, were quite surprised. They were like, oh, okay, here's someone is British, but from the US, and he's come all the way over here to this very small village in Nepal to come and see fishing cats. That's right. Incredible. They have value. And so this local community was able to kind of use the locals as citizen scientists to be able to kind of put camera traps out on their fish ponds and kind of report the observations that they have, report the detections that they have. And all of this kind of contributes to a local database of the fishing cats in the area. And so when I went, I had local fish farmers grab me by the hand and take me to their ponds and say, look, I have fishing cats here. And they'll show me the sign, like, here's a fishing cat paw print. They'll show me videos of fishing cats taking fish out of their ponds, and they'll be like, look, it's surviving. We're coexisting. And so while the local people, they may lose a few fish, what they do is they get some income from the ecotourism, the very small ecotourism that's hopefully will be building up over the years. And also some alternative livelihood by being involved with the conservation initiatives that we have.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a great example, right, Jen? It reminded me of like the communities where they make their animal a sign of positivity, and they like you're saying, it's like now they're proud of them and they want to protect them because there's a reciprocal relationship there now, and they see the value. They can see the value in their
get them invested. Yeah, right. That's
you get them invested, and they have a more sense of ownership over the species that they coexist with and the habitats. Well, and they become very proud. Like, this is the place. You want to see fishing cats? Let me tell you where you see fishing cats.
That's
this
awesome.
Place in Nepal. And so we have National Geographic photographers, other wildlife photographers going down there and photographing fishing cats.
And when I say they, I mean we, because actually that would be the same if you're coming to my area. I'd be like, let me take you to show you where there's a beaver in the river here, or, there's a this kind of bird over here. Like, it's a we experience. And I think that's across the board. When we can get invested in our own personal backyard / ecosystems, this is where we realize we're on an even playing field with all of these animals.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, it's so interesting because we've talked to several people who are dealing with that sort of human wildlife conflict, like ranchers and wolves and things like that, like just the re-educating of wild horses and things like that, like re-educating of, that this actually can be your friend. So maybe you're educating that bobcats aren't bobcats will help you. So you don't need to keep killing them. I love that about where we are in our evolution, that there's smart people like you who realize, we just have to share some information with you and we can live in more harmony, and it also benefits you financially. I just think it's very cool how that's starting to happen more and more.
Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful example of how we humans really mess it up. And then if we can just be re-educated about how, like exactly what you're saying, Jen, like let the bobcats take care of the beavers, and they will kind of continue this
a balance. Yeah, right.
Right. So I do want to dig into, because I feel like this is our last really important topic, is digging into these, like how important these cats are to the ecosystems. And I feel like going from bobcat to this is a perfect segue. Like the ecosystems they live in, how much of a barometer they are to the health of the landscape. So if we're kind of moving back to the little wildcats, I feel like the little guys are on the planet are the ones who we should be monitoring closely as a gauge where we are and how we're doing in context to climate change and human impact. And, we've talked a lot about this in context to insects, right, Jen, and krill in the ocean. And so talk to us about the critical role that small cats play in the balance and reciprocal relationship in their landscape.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And that's something that we are still trying to investigate. But, for a long time now, when it comes to species roles in ecosystems, we've always focused on the large megafauna, the big wide-ranging elephants and, the big cats. So, for example, it's always been talked about tigers acting as great umbrella species for conservation, because if you conserve the tiger, tigers require a certain amount of prey, they require a certain amount of habitats. And so if you focus on conserving the tiger, you conserve everything else underneath it under the umbrella effect.
Right.
And that's, of course, very effective, and has been proven to be effective, across the range for a wide range of species. But the small and the medium species tend to get overlooked as well as being their own umbrella species in their own kind of ecological niche. Right. And so for small cats and more carnivores, compared to the megafauna, they're more species rich. There are 33 species of small cats versus the 7 species of big cats.
Right.
So they provide more potential sentinels in many different kind of ecological systems. We have, so like I said, we can monitor black-footed cats and understand how changes of arid conditions or the development of arid conditions are going to affect the species and the subsequent kind of ecosystem health. They also occupy a much wider range of ecological niches, therefore, exhibiting a greater variety of sensitivities to change. So we're talking about the flat-headed cat and the fishing cat. They're wetland specialists, and so along these areas, there's a lot of development of oil palm, for example, and that brings a lot of pollution to the waterways and the wetland areas. And if you pollute that habitat, the wetland, then you reduce the food source. Where are they going to go?
Right. Yeah.
And to go back with tigers. Tigers are very resilient. They obviously prefer kind of primary forests, but relatively recent research has shown that if you degrade a forest, they can do equally as good there as well, because it kind of opens up the browse, it attracts prey, they can hunt in these areas. They're able to adapt. Yeah. But for these ecological specialists, wetland specialists, they're going to be affected. Same thing for Andean mountain cats and the Canada lynx. The Andean mountain cat, they occur at high altitudes. Right. The Canada lynx occurs at high latitudes. And so these are the areas that are going to be impacted first by climate change. And so understanding their distribution and how that is changing over time will be really important for us. It'll be a really good indicator of global change.
And I think it's an important thing. It's why we wanted to talk to you too. It's like talking about the little guys. I really think they are such a barometer, and they are so highly sensitive often too. They're clearly delicate, but the balance can be that way.
And you're right about the sensitivity. We always talk about the 3 main threats of kind of conflicts, deforestation, and poaching. But small cats, there's a myriad of other threats, disease, hybridization, prey depletion, and all this sort of stuff. And many of these are caused by humans. And so kind of understanding how that affects them is going to be really important for us to kind of understand global change. And the other thing is that because they're small and medium-sized carnivores, where they sit in the ecological chain, they hold a much more intermediate kind of trophic position. And so once you remove that link, it compounds the many other links that it's connected to.
Absolutely.
And so again, I think that reinforces the need to kind of look at the middle ground here in terms of species, and understand their roles a bit more. So for small cats, there are 33 of them. For the most of them, we don't exactly know what the ecological role is, and that's something that Panthera small cat program wants to dig into by kind of implementing these very in-depth ecological studies. And threat assessments to understand, what is their role exactly.
That's exactly right.
That sounds like that's a big part. Is just you're still in the gathering data.
Yeah.
Part of this, like you're still trying to figure out how to get the data you need to know what you're dealing with, right?
Very, very much so. to get that data, but also how to get that high quality data. And so that brings us back to we need to do camera trapping, we need to do genetics, we need to work with the local communities. And so
Yeah.
A lot of that has been done for the big cats. And a lot of that is we already know how to do it. Like we know how to count tigers. We know the statistical frameworks. We know the study designs to be put in place. But there are many publications on these topics. But for small cats, we're still experimenting. For some, we can study. Clouded leopards, they're a medium-sized cat. They share their range with tigers. We get good detections. But when it comes to black-footed cat or flat-headed cat,
yeah, right. Yeah.
I think that's like, Jen, like exactly your point, and that leads me to the last question that we'd like to ask everybody is, I usually say, why do you think this is important? But this is why this conversation is important, right? But talk to us a little bit more about, why does this relate us better and connect us to animals and natural world better? Like, what new perspectives or awarenesses can we gain from having this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, a different perspective from a different kind of animal. We like I mentioned in my background, I've always wanted to be a conservation biologist, and that was because I was watching documentaries on elephants and lions and tigers and all these sorts of things. I never grew up once seen a documentary about a flat-headed cat or or a bay cat, and so really putting the conservation spotlight on these species just connects us to 33 more species of a very beloved kind of genus of animals that we all love. That they occur across the globe and have critical ecological roles. A lot of it is still unknown, but it's exciting to kind of unravel that information.
Absolutely.
But there are things that we do know. They face significant threats from habitat loss and degradation, hunting and poaching, climate change. But it's very easy for us to put effective conservation strategies in place for the small cats. Again, particularly when addressing human-wildlife conflicts or working with local communities and raising awareness and education. I think there are challenges, but we can overcome them quite easily. But in general, I just want people to understand that small cat conservation is important. It is urgent because we are going through a bit of a biodiversity crisis at the moment. And like I said, the small cats represent 33 different species across the globe. And they'll be, very important kind of global indicators of change.
That's right. And we didn't know they exist before. Now we know they exist. And so we care. Now we know we have another animal in our scope. And it just sort of helps, again, we've talked about this. It's not about that you need to now go study black-footed cats, but the fact that we know they're there, we're aware of it. It just opens up our perspective a little bit more.
And again, it's very easy to do. And I think one example is the Pallas cat. I think a few years ago, no one had even heard of the Pallas cat until a few images made it onto the internet. And now it's infamously known as the grumpy cat,
right.
and many people's favorite. Every time I show a picture of a Pallas cat, they're like, "Whoa, what is that?" And they just want to know more. And that's the same with the other 33 small cat species. We put up an image, and they're like, "What is that? Tell me more. We need to know more about this cat." And so that's what we're trying to uncover.
And you're probably like you're putting lighting these fires that was lit in you as a kid, and these other people, like maybe someone else will want to become a conservation biologist because they learn about these cats that they didn't even know existed before. And, these young kids can grow up and be like, I want to study those. I think that's great. Yeah. You can't care about something you don't know about.
Ming, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been absolutely fascinating. I so appreciate your effort in talking with us, and we've learned an insane amount today. So thank you so much for your work. We will keep track of you and your work and Panthera, and we will put all your links in our show notes. And and is that the best way to follow you, find you, keep tabs on what's going on?
Yes, that's the best way. Yeah, if you want to learn more about cats, please visit Panthera's website, which is just the standard www.panthera.org. And you can learn about more information about our many programs, our big cat programs and our small cat work. Yeah, so hopefully I'll have the chance to come back. But thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's really wonderful. And thanks for kind of contributing to small cat conservation by getting the message out there.
Absolutely. Well, good luck on your next trip, and we look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks so much.
Will do. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the takeaway for Ming Wong. Oh my gosh, just so much new information, and I kept thinking about all of us cat lovers out there. I think this conversation is so important because without these small wild cats, we would not have our cutie pie domestic cats. And it just sort of reminded me of that whole wolf conversation. Without wolves, we don't have dogs.
Right. We just didn't know that without these cats, we wouldn't have cats. We just didn't really know that.
We didn't know anything. How much don't we know? We're so not knowing. But yeah, one of my biggest kind of takeaway overall, I think, is, when Ming was talking about how the large cats are like the big sexy ones and they get all the attention, but we really need to keep a close eye on the middle guys, and then he was talking about how the big cats are like an umbrella for small cat conservation, which is so super important to small cats. But let's get to know these ones better now that we know they exist, right? And you had a really good point about that.
Yeah, I just think that that whole thing about he was talking about, and you were talking about too, that how sensitive a lot of these are and how elusive they are and how difficult they are to capture on cameras and all these things, like just the fact that we haven't known that they exist. And so, it's hard to understand something that you don't really know, and that they're still trying to figure out how to study them.
Yeah.
Is part of it. Not only that, that we just don't know about them, but even the people who know about them are having trouble gathering information about them, data. And that was really interesting to me too, that the genetic, like studying them through genetics is also important. And just all the roadblocks they come up against trying to study them. Like you were saying, he was saying, the monkeys turn off the cameras, or they don't.
Man, I know.
Or they can sense the cameras, and so they don't go in those trees. Anyway, I just learned a ton.
Yeah, me too. And it's so true what you're saying about, they're living among us, right? They're all right out there in the quote unquote open, but they aren't, because they are, like you said, maybe that's why we don't know a lot, because no one's ever taken the real time and focus, and they are hard to catch. They are hard to track and follow. They are hard to get DNA from. So it's all fair. It's just, it just made me think too about, we're supposed to know about sea creatures 4 miles down in the ocean because we can't get there, right? But these guys are living amongst us, and I think it's just a good reminder. And I love his dedication to like the middle guys, the little guys. Yeah. And just again, it's that pillar. It's like that Jenga pillar, right? And they're such a critical part of that. And he's so dedicated to people understanding why they actually are so important in the part they play in the ecosystem they live in, and they're such a barometer. And again, I think that's across the board. I just think it's really important to remember in this kind of cat conversation. Well, should I even say remember? Because I didn't even know any of these guys existed. So
exactly.
I can't remember what I just learned.
That's right. And even he was saying some of the ways that they're important to the ecosystem they don't fully understand yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so new. It's just like I was blown away by that it's just beginning to unfold in 2023. That
I know.
Really? Okay.
I know.
And there's so many. Yeah.
It just is like you're saying, the scope is so wide. So again, thank you to Dr. Ming Wong for joining us today. And it was fun. It was funny. It was super interesting. We are we are super fans now. And make sure you head over to their website, panthera.org, and that's panthera.org, where you can find out more about Dr. Wong and his research and all things, 33 different species of small cats. And of course, as always, you can head over to our website. We'll have those links as well at kindredpodcast.co. And also you can subscribe to our newsletter there. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Kindred Pod. And if you especially felt taken by these little cutie pies, which please go to the website and take a look at them. They're just incredible. You will be so surprised. And check out the webbed feet of the fishing cat, which is also really interesting. Rate and review us. It makes a big difference. And again, as always, thanks very much for listening and lots of love. Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find links to our socials, Patreon page, and show notes.